So, guys, about AEW Revolution, it's right around the corner, and I did my own like fantasy booking based on the results of AEW Grand Slam and where the show is, and like where the direction the show is. And I also feel with AEW Grand Slam, oh no, with AEW Revolution, it should be like a 4 hour show. It should really end at midnight. And one other big thing I do with my match card is that I might do 12 or 13 matches. And then if I was working in AEW, I would say, okay, Tony, maybe we should take two or three of these matches and put these as main events of Dynamite or Collision. Because obviously, one of the big complaints about AEW is that their shows are way, way, way too long. And you don't make fans happy by having more stuff. You say, okay, we have to make these things at a reasonable amount of time. Like, I think the rule should be every pay-per-view should be 3 hours. Your big three pay-per-views, which is Revolution, Double or Nothing, and All Out should be at least like 4 hours. And then All In, your shows should be like at least 5 hours. That should be the appropriate length for all these shows, really. But you do not like do every show at like 4 or 5 hours. Like, I know, like when I was at the Ring of Honor Final Battle show, I was very angry because the show was like 4.5 hours. It's like, fuck, really, that's like way too long. So this is what I have for a match card, and I'll explain why I have every one of these matches. My first match would be a fatal three-way between Ciampa, Mark Briscoe, and Kyle Fletcher for the TNT Championship, because these three guys have been about the TNT Championship. I would do a storyline where where Tommaso Ciampa says, "Hey, I get a rematch clause," and then Kyle Fletcher's like, then Kyle Fletcher just says, "Okay, you know what? Yeah, we'll do it." And then what happens is Mark Briscoe comes out and he says, "Hey, you know what, Ciampa? When I was the TNT champion, when you got the TNT championship from me, I didn't get my rematch clause." And then Don Callis says something like, "You know what? I'm sick of you, Mark Briscoe, but we're gonna have a triple threat match, and whoever wins this, nobody else can face them, really." So it's almost like Don Callis is setting up another like situation where Briscoe and Kyle Fletcher are going to face each other. So this kind of irritates Kyle Fletcher. And one of the reasons why I want to do this is because some people need to be kicked out of the Don Callis family. I think Kyle Fletcher needs to be kicked out eventually. Takeshi Takashita needs to be kicked out, and Andrade needs to be kicked out, because you need to kick out all the baby faces. And there's not a lot of singles stars in AEW. They need to start, or you can do something where these three guys, Takashita, Kyle Fletcher, and Andrade, can form their own faction or something like that, or they can look out for each other. Because you can't just kind of have so many people in Don Callis' family, no progression, really. So that would be the first match. But I also think they can kind of do carnage and chaos and a bunch of crazy spots. The next match that I have on my laptop is Jon Moxley versus Wheeler Yuta for the Continental Championship. And the reason why I want to do this is a lot of people are predicting Jon Moxley versus Takashita for the Continental Championship, like part 3. And the reason why I don't want to do that is because that's very predictable. And then also, look, Jon Moxley was the reason why Wheeler Yuta got his head shaved, because he told him, get back in the fucking ring. And they have to kind of explain that. And more than likely, Mox would say, this happening to you is probably going to make you a better wrestler, because you failed, you paid for it. And maybe you just like saying, hey, aren't we all bad guys? Like, where's your heart at, Jon Moxley? Because the old, when after we beat Bryan Danielson, something like this happened, you would have pulled me out and you would have took the Clippers and you would have attacked Bryan Danielson or something like that. So, I think that kind of makes a lot of sense. Instead of we're going to do Moxley versus Takashita part 3. And then also the other problem is that maybe Yuta will screw over Moxley. And other things like that. So I think Wheeler Yuta versus Jon Moxley would be the right match to have. That's not happened before. It creates progression. The next match that I would do is Okada versus Takashita. And if Takashita wins, he becomes the international champion. But if he loses, he's kicked out of the Don Callis family, and then he gets a country beating by all the members. So this could set up, okay, well, Takeshita loses, he's off television for a while, or maybe Will Ospreay saves him, or maybe Kyle Fletcher saves him, or Kyle Fletcher's like saying, hey, Don, you know what? You've been like a father to me. Can you please let this go? Because, you know what? Takeshita's been like a brother to him because they're actually best friends in real life, really. So that could create like a dynamic. That could kind of create like an interesting dynamic where you have more friction than Don Callis' family, but this is also pushing things forward. This is also Revolution. And the point of Revolution is to say, okay, World's End is the end of storylines and the beginning of some storylines. Revolution is the beginning of storylines that are going to continue through the year, really. So Takeshita versus the Don Callis family is where they need to go. Let's start putting fire under that. Let's stop making things simmer. Some things they have to pull the trigger on. And then I think I'm correct that his name is Takeshita. That's how they pronounce him in AEW. I know a lot of people have gotten mad about this. It's in some cases people say Takeshita, and some people say Takeshita. But, you know, I think it is Takeshita in AEW. But my name is Byron, but people have been calling me Brian my entire life, really. So I understand how disrespectful it is to get people's names wrong, and how it makes me look uncultured too. Because, you know, just because somebody has a Japanese name doesn't mean it means we should put in the extra effort to say their name correctly. You know, and that's with everybody. You know, every group of people we should say people's names correctly because people are not like dogs where they're not going to care. The next match I'll do is the Babes of Wrath versus the Sisters of Sin versus the Iconics versus Jamie Hayter and Alex Windsor for the women's tag team title. And the reason why I want to do this is that a lot of people have been complaining that there's not been a lot of women's matches. And then you got to ask yourself, what's really the next step for the Babes of Wrath? And I think that the best thing to do is to say, hey, you know what, having a multi-women tag team match is the best way to go, really, because you're showing the audience, here are the other women in the women's tag team division. And I think that there should be some women, and they actually said they assigned the Iconics. So I think the point of it is to kind of say, okay, here are certain women who are going to go after the tag team titles for the rest of this year. They're going to be in the tag team division for the rest of this year. And there's certain women who are going to go after the TBS championship, and there's going to be certain women that are going to go after the women's heavyweight and the women's heavyweight championship, the women's championship. So this is a good way of kind of like saying, okay, these are the women who are going to be going after like the tag team titles. We're going to have other women as well, really, but this is a way to kind of diversify, really, and I think that's like the best option. The next match that I'll do is that I'll do Brody King versus Kenny Omega, and the winner gets a shot at Dynasty because, you know, you're doing Swerve versus Kenny Omega, and Kenny Omega should win. And then what happens is that the following week he says something like he wants to challenge Brody King. He says, like, you know what, you are the face of this company. I see something special in you. And he can even say something like, you know, when AJ Styles, because Kenny Omega wanted to quit professional wrestling, but he was inspired by AJ Styles. So they can kind of like say, hey, you know, Kenny Omega say, when I wanted to quit this company, when I felt like I could give it my all and give my best, and I felt underlooked, I felt like quitting the company, but it was actually the phenomenal one that kept me keep on going, really. So I want to give you an opportunity to be inspired to take you to the next level. You've been doing a lot of really great things, but I think you need that one or two more matches that are going to take you to the next level. So I'm willing to do this. And then you do Brody King versus Kenny Omega at Dynasty. And I think like what they can even do is you can have Brody King actually win, and then at Double or Nothing, MJF versus Brody King, or you could do something like have Kenny Omega versus MJF at Dynasty, or you save that to maybe the because I think they're probably going to do maybe Wrestle Dream in Toronto, because I think Edge and Christian are retiring this year. There's going to be other Canadian shows, really, but that would kind of set up other things, really. And then Brody King needs to be booked strongly, because as I said, he should not go back to the tag team division. We need to start taking people, and we need to start taking people, and we need to start booking people strongly. We need to start saying, hey, you've been in the tag team division for a long time, Brody King. We need to progress you. The next match that I would do is is the Gates of Agony and Ricochet versus Jet Speed Rodeo for the trios titles. And I like Hangman doing double duty because, that's also important for AEW. If somebody has two titles, why are they just having one match a night, really? So I think you can open with Gates of Agony and Ricochet versus Jet Speed Rodeo. And I have no problem with Jet Speed Rodeo losing their tag team titles for their trios titles for a few reasons. And I think Gates of Agony and Ricochet would be a really great representative of that title, of those titles, for a couple of reasons. Because the Gates of Agony are going to help Ricochet when he's the national champion, and then that's trios champion, they can all defend that. And Ricochet knows how to kind of like create a lot of heel heat and other shit like that. So I really think that's almost like, hey, since he is the guy that can actually instigate people, and hey, he represents the trios titles very well. And also the real problem is you don't want to give people the trios championship and then they're doing nothing for a couple of months, really. And I think the Gates of Agony, they kind of have that, you know what, I haven't proven myself, but now I want to prove myself type of energy to them. So I think that's kind of like the best type of, that's probably like the best type of like energy, chemistry that they have, really. So I really think that they need to kind of just keep on working with that type of energy because, that's kind of one of the reasons why they turned heels, was because they felt overlooked, and they're also big bad motherfuckers, really. So it's almost really like saying, okay, you know what, we want to kind of solidify that. And then also, too, as I said, imagine like Ricochet wrestles for NJPW. So what would happen if you had Ricochet and the Gates of Agony versus the Japanese team at Forbidden Door? What if they go down to Mexico and they face like, the Sky team or something like that, really? Like, there's so many things that they can do with those titles, really. And if Hangman Page is too distracted in the heavyweight division, he needs to not be holding those titles. But I think that just to progress them and say, hey, we're going to make the champions of the trios division these obnoxious heels. Imagine if you have Dalton Castle and the Outrunners beat them at Wembley Stadium or something like that. Like, that would kind of be like a very beautiful story. So I think that would be the way to go. My next match would be Marina Shafir versus Toni Storm in a Hollywood ending. I think that what they can do is that they can take Marina Shafir can kidnap Amina Shirakawa, and she can shave her head down, and then what happens is that Toni Storm loses her sanity, and then they have a match, really. I've said this about what happened last year. I was so mad that they didn't do Willow Nightingale versus Marina Shafir, because they had multiple matches, the women's, they had the intergender anarchy in the arena. So I really kind of felt that, they should have had Marina Shafir and Toni Storm one-on-one, really. So I think that you can even do something like Toni Storm versus Marina Shafir for in the Hollywood ending match, because you can kind of do something where she wants to get revenge. She can talk more on the microphone. They had the match. And also last year, the Hollywood ending was kind of like the best match on the card, or a lot of people were mad that it should have been the main event match of the show, given the main event with Moxley, Edge, and Christian, so I really think that would be a match to have. There's story, there's history there. It's also Oscar night, so why would you do something like not capitalize on that? The next match you can do is Samoa Joe versus Swerve Strickland, because Samoa Joe is from the California area. The other problem is that I think it should be Omega versus Strickland. Strickland loses, and then you can't do something, and then you have to do something to say, okay, well, Swerve Strickland needs to beat significant people, because I think he should face MJF one-on-one. I don't think that's happened yet, so that would be a good pay-per-view. And I don't want MJF versus Swerve at Dynasty, because you cannot say that every single time it's Dynasty, Swerve challenges for the title, really, because the problem is that if you do that too many times, that's too predictable, really. And we just look at The Undertaker always faced the heavyweight champion at the at Survivor Series, because he debuted at the Survivor Series. We have to change it up a little bit. So I think that would be good for Swerve Strickland. to actually just have a match against Joe. Joe's filming Twisted Metal right now, I believe, so you kind of do him and versus Joe, or you can kind of do him maybe versus that would be it, because you can't do Swerve versus Hook or Shibata versus Hook because they're not like that significant. So I think that'd be good. The next match is that I would do Bandito versus El Colon, and the reason why I want to do this match is that I think Hologram's coming back soon because obviously you see El Colon. The other thing is that I think for Bandito, they really need to make ROH matter. So this is just a way to say, hey, everybody, we want to remind you guys that ROH is one of our programs. So you can kind of have him have like a throwaway ROH championship match. Like, do you really think El Colon deserves to win the ROH championship? They'll have a really great luchador match, and then they should advertise other events, or they should be like, hey, in April we're going to do this show in Canada, and it's gonna be Josh Alexander versus Bandito or something like that. So that's all really important because you're saying, hey, okay, ROH matters, and I think that for Revolution, having an ROH championship match would help elevate that. The next match that I have is Tekla versus Statlander in an LA Riot match, because Statlander lost the championship. She really feels like she's really like devastated that she lost. There's people that are very sympathetic to her, and also empathetic because they're like, we understand what it's like to never really show our best. Really, people feel it's kind of rushed. People feel it's a fluke, and then it's also because Statlander was distracted by the. She was distracted by the Triangle of Madness, really. So I really think that this would be a way for them to have a match. Tekla can win this one. Statlander can kind of go on a redemption arc. Maybe in the women's Owen Hart tournament, you could do her and Mercedes, and the winner faces Tekla. So there could be a redemption story with Statlander. But I also think that Statlander is angry. She's pissed. Tekla is known as is supposed to be Tekla. I think they said that she got fired from a company because she attacked the promoter. So I really want to see this Tekla that's like this unhinged, crazy, violent bitch that takes things too far, really. So I think that this would be the right match to kind of elevate Tekla to that I cross lines type of thing, really. And then also you can have Statlander being like, I'm so angry about this loss. I need this title one more time to prove that I have something to show. I didn't get to show everything that I could do, really. And I'm mad, I'm frustrated. And this is the way to get what I want, is the way to show what I can do is to get this back, really. And I think that would be that'd be the way to go with this. The next match is FTR versus the Young Bucks. I don't need to say a lot about this. They won the I think the Eliminator last week, or like the Fatal 4-Way tournament or whatever that they had last week. So FTR versus the Young Bucks, that's what they're gonna do. This is kind of a little stupid, but I will do Private Party versus the Rascals. The Smoke Party versus the Shot Party. I think that'll be I think that'll be very, very funny. But also, one of the reasons why I want to do this is that Private Party just came back, so we don't want to do something like it's Private Party and then they're gone for a couple months, really. So I want to kind of make them relevant. They can feud with the Rascals. They can become this, Shots and Smoke. That could be like their faction, and they can go after the trios titles or whatever, really. So I think that would be kind of like a lot of fun. That could be like a very interesting match. You have like weed and fog machines and colorful fog machines, and then also you have like all these shots all over the places. There could be something really interesting with that. And the last match is Hangman versus MJF. And I've kind of said this too, that it should be a regular match. I don't want this to be a Texas death match, or like an LA or like a Los Angeles death match or whatever, really. It should be a regular match, because not every match needs to be a Texas death match. We don't want Hangman Adam Page is in AEW. He's not in Combat Zone Wrestling. And then the other thing, too, is that he cannot turn to Jon Moxley or Darby Allin. And speaking of which, I have another bonus match to put in there. But I think Hangman versus MJF, that's where they're going with. They should keep that. If I was booking it, I would do Hangman versus MJF versus Brody King, because Brody King's going to be very over. So that's how I would book it. I would book Hangman MJF versus Brody King, even though they're going to do a one-on-one. Even though it's going to be Hangman MJF, if I was fancy booking, I would do Hangman versus MJF versus Brody King. I would do something where maybe what happens is that MJF attacks Bandito backstage. He attacks his family, and then and then Tony Khan punishes MJF and says, "Okay, we're going to put Brody King in the main event because of what you did." And then Hangman says something like, "You know what? I support the Mexican people, and your actions were really disgusting, so I'm okay with this. Like it's going to be the three biggest guys in the company, but also too, we're going to have like a 2-on-1 ass whooping on you, MJF. Like that'd be the way to do that because Brody King's really over. Let's try to boost him up a bit, So I think that's what I would do: Hangman, MJF versus and Brody King, and then also that's also a good storyline because in a way that's kind of what ICE and all this stuff is about. It's about America First, or people saying, okay, you know what, I want like my policies. I want this thing. I want my policies to matter. I want to be a bully. I want to take over things. So you can kind of tie into MJF saying, it's MJF can even do a gimmick saying like it's MJF first. It's America first. It's MJF first. And then anybody who takes attention away from me, I'm gonna get revenge on it and on them really. So he attacks Bandito, and then you set up Bandito versus MJF at Forbidden Door. Bandito versus MJF for the ROH title at another pay-per-view, or even at like a Forbidden Door in Mexico or Mexico Grand Slam. So this can kind of, so as I said, it's a lot of tie-ins really. And then you're taking like really hot people. You're saying Brody King, he was a tag team guy for a while. Now he's in the heavyweight division, and we're progressing him. And the last match that I would have is Darby Allin and Mark Briscoe versus Clark Connors and Gabe Kidd. Like that's also another match that I would have. I know that I said the triple threat TNT Championship match, but that's also another idea that I would have really, because that way Mark Briscoe is going to be in the tag team division with Darby Allin. It gives Darby Allin a direction for a while. But I also understand why that would be a bad thing, because Mark Briscoe, I think he said that he doesn't want to be in a tag team with anybody because Jay Briscoe died. So he wants to kind of be like, okay, I'm retired from tag team wrestling because I always did it with my brother. So you can do an emotional story arc with that. I think the other thing you can do is that Mark Briscoe and Darby Allin would make a really excellent tag team because they both have very similar Daredevil styles. But I also think the other problem is that Darby Allin wants to be a heavyweight champion one day. So you do have to get to that point, in my opinion, where you have to kind of like, put Darby Allin in like the, you have to make Darby Allin actually go for the heavyweight title, like a year in the heavyweight championship division. And he can't be wrestling for other titles and whatever really. So I think this also creates another delay. But I think this is also a way for him to say, hey, Darby Allin's going to be one of the stars this year. He's going to be in the World Heavyweight Championship picture, or he needs to matter. So let's actually just make him matter. Let's not derail him to other divisions, because they've done that many times. Like he was going after the heavyweight championship, he became the TNT champion. He went after the heavyweight championship, he went to tag team with Sting really. So, and then he was also in the Continental Classic when he wanted to go after the heavyweight title really. So that's all I gotta say really. I think that would be a really, really great card. There's some matches that you can take from this and be like, okay, let's main event Dynamite Collision, so that way we're not having a 5-hour show or whatever. Because obviously, for those who don't know, I'm actually going to go to Tokyo. So I'm going to go to, I'm going to be in LA from Friday to Sunday night. And then after Revolution, my flight to Tokyo is like almost like 3 hours later, really. So I might even have to do something like miss the main event. Or I might even have to do something like the show's running too long. I might have to leave during the middle of the show. Or if the show ends at like midnight, I still have like 3 hours, because remember that in LA Pacific time zone, so 9 p.m. there is 12 a.m. and it's 12 a.m. on the East Coast really. So more than likely I'll make my flight still, but it will be a very fucking epic night to do both really. But overall, I think my match card is definitely like taking everything and building a really great direction. I would also do Anthony Bowens versus Ricochet for the national championship, just because I want Anthony Bowens and Max Caster to be together, but I want them to do what they did with the New Day. I want them to repeat what they did with the New Day, where it's like they're together, but they go after singles titles as well, really. And I think that's a different direction for AEW. You can make Anthony Bowens versus Ricochet a match like a rematch at Wembley Stadium or something like that. Like give Anthony Bowens like a singles title or something like that. I think so. I think like with these matches, like these 14, 15 matches, these are all really great options to choose from for AEW.